the island of Sodor. Construction was nearly complete on the new search and rescue centre, which would help people in trouble. It will be made of the strongest wood of all, Jobi wood, Sir Topham Hatt told Thomas and the other engines. The wood will arrive today at Brendam Docks. The most useful engine at the end of the day will get to pull the Jobi logs to the search and rescue centre. Diesel wanted to show off. So, with a biff and a bash, he shunted all the Jobi wood away from the docks. "Stop!" Thomas puffed. Diesel only went faster. Unfortunately, the heavy flatbeds holding the wood jumped off the track and pulled Diesel towards the edge of a steep cliff. Thomas pulled Diesel back to safety, but all the rich red wood tumbled into the sea. Sir Topham Hatt was very pleased with Thomas. "You made the right decision to pull Diesel back. You didn't wait to be asked or to be told." As a reward, Thomas would visit the mainland and bring back more Jobi wood. The next day, while Thomas waited to be loaded onto a ship, Salty told him and Percy about Misty Island. "It's a mysterious place," Salty huffed. "Once an engine was lost there and couldn't be found because of the mist." "If I were lost on Misty Island," Thomas peeped, "I'd puff 3 times. I'd come save you," Percy promised. The dock manager informed Thomas that there was no room for him on the ship. But then Thomas spotted a raft. "The ship can pull me on that," Thomas puffed. Percy was worried that the raft wasn't safe. "Don't worry. Sir Topham Hatt said I make the right decisions," assured Thomas. And with that, the ship set out for the mainland, pulling Thomas on a raft. When Thomas was far out at sea and darkness started to fall, he heard a creak and a crash. The chain to the steamship had snapped. Thomas whistled and wheeshed as the big boat steamed away, but no one could hear him. The rocking waves carried Thomas into the misty night. The next morning, Thomas found himself on an unfamiliar island. It was quiet and very misty. As Thomas explored, he heard strange sounds. Rusty wheels rattled on old rails, and wild whistles echoed all around him. Then, as Thomas rounded a bend, he made an amazing discovery. Thomas had come fender to fender with 3 of the strangest engines he'd ever seen. Their names were Bash, Dash, and Ferdinand. They told Thomas that he was on Misty Island. "We're the logging locos," said Dash. "We played rattling wheels and whistling whistles with you," Bash said. But you didn't play with us. You can now if you want. Thomas didn't want to play with Bash, Dash and Ferdinand. Their games were strange. No, thank you. I have to get back to the island of Sodor. And with that, Thomas wheeshed backwards down the track. The next morning, on Sodor, Sir Topham Hatt learned that Thomas was missing. The engines searched all over Sodor. After a scary night alone, Thomas spent the next day looking for the logging locos. Then, overlooking a deep valley, Thomas discovered an old logging camp. Thomas exclaimed, "I've found the logging locos!" Bash, Dash and Ferdinand were loading wood in the old logging camp. Thomas asked them for help getting off the island, but they were busy. "We said hello to you yesterday," Dash said, "but you didn't want to be friends with us." "I'm sorry," Thomas peeped. "I was silly to think I could find a way off Misty Island by myself." Then Thomas realised something amazing. These logs are Jobi logs. That's the wood we need to build the search and rescue centre. The logging locos agreed to help Thomas collect logs. "We can't work this hard," said Dash. "We'll run out of oil," said Bash. The logging locos weren't diesels, but they used wood and oil for fuel. "I'm sure you have enough oil," Thomas reassured them. "Sir Topham Hatt says I make good decisions." The engines busily hauled logs and shunted flatbeds. But when they came to a rickety old bridge, Thomas stopped. Thomas didn't like the bridge, but he knew he had to cross it to collect the Jobi wood. So, wobbly wheel by wobbly wheel, he crept slowly across. Thomas needed a way to load the Jobi wood onto flatbeds. Luckily, he spotted an old machine. "That's Hee-Haw," said Dash. "He's the old log-loading machine." "He needs too much oil," Bash added. "That's why we don't use him." Thomas wasn't worried. They poured the last of the oil into Hee-Haw. Soon, Thomas had 3 flatbeds full of Jobi logs. But he had no idea how to get them back to Sodor. "We could use the tunnel," Dash suggested. Thomas was amazed. "You didn't tell me there was a tunnel to Sodor," he peeped. "That's because it's closed," Dash said. "Because it's dangerous," Bash added. Thomas was too excited to listen. "I know all about tunnels. It won't be dangerous." Wheezed and wheeshed to the old tunnel. Dash stopped at the entrance. "We locos don't have enough oil to puff to Sodor," he said. "Of course you do," puffed Thomas. They all disappeared into the tunnel. suddenly, there was trouble ahead. The tracks were blocked by rocks. Then, with a rumble and a crash, more rocks smashed down behind them. "We can push the rocks out of the way," Thomas puffed. Bash, Dash, and Ferdinand bravely pumped their pistons. But with a gasp and a groan, they ran out of oil. The engines were stuck in the tunnel, and no one knew where they were. Just then, Ferdinand noticed something. "I feel air on my funnel," he peeped. Dash spotted a hole in the roof of the tunnel. "Puff forward, Thomas, and huff your hardest," Bash suggested. "Someone will see your steam." Thomas started to puff. Back at Brendam Docks, Percy saw something that made his firebox fizz. 3 puffs of steam floated high in the distance. "It's Thomas!" Percy peeped. "He's on Misty Island and he needs help." Meanwhile, Thomas and the logging locos were waiting in the dark tunnel. Soon they heard a noise coming through the rocks. "Whiff and I have found you, Thomas," peeped Percy. "Watch out, Thomas," Whiff puffed. "Percy and I are going to push through the rocks to reach you." With that, Percy and Whiff pumped their pistons and crashed through the rocks. Whiff pulled the brave engines out of the tunnel. The logging locos wheeshed and whooshed with wonder when they saw the sunny island of Sodor. Thomas helped the logging locos to the Sodor steamworks for repairs. Sir Topham Hatt was excited to see that Thomas was safe, and that with all the Jobi wood Thomas had found on Misty Island, the rescue centre would be finished in no time. Finally, the Sodor Search and Rescue Centre and the Misty Island Tunnel were officially opened. "Today is a very special day, made possible by very special engines," Sir Topham Hatt said. The people cheered and the engines peeped. Thomas, surrounded by his old and new friends, beamed with pride. The end. Want to have more fun with Thomas and Friends?